Good afternoon or morning or wherever you're tuning in from. We're so happy to have you here. My name is Bunny Ellerin. I'm the co-founder and CEO of DHNY Digital Health New York, and we are delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, which is Leveraging Conversational AI in Healthcare. Let me just introduce our three panelists, and then we'll get into it. We've got Ben Edelshane, who's the VP of Clinical Engagement and Digital Innovation at Highmark Health. We have Israel Krush, the co-founder and CEO of Hyro. And we have Yoni Stein, co-founder and CEO of Lagona. And all are using AI in many different ways, which we're going to explore today. So why don't we just kick off, give a brief intro, who you are, your company, and perhaps how AI is influencing your sphere of work. Yoni, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Bunny. Happy to. Hello, everyone. My name is Yoni Stein. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Lagona here. We at Lagona offer conversational AI combined with what we call individual determinants of health to supercharge the care management efficiency and effectiveness or impact, mostly for payers and care management organizations. We'll elaborate more on that. To Bunny's point, we leverage conversational AI across many aspects of our product offering, from taking some of the basic low-value components of care management workflow away, such as call summaries and ambient listening, as it's called, but then elevating also people to be able to practice at the top of their license, driving better quality, training, and overall performance.
Hi, everyone. Israel Krush, co-founder and CEO of Hyro. At Hyro, we bridge the gap between the rising patient expectations to the workforce capacity issues that healthcare providers have by deploying conversational AI assistants. By that, I mean chatbots and voice AI assistants on the call center in a responsible manner to automate various parts of the patient journey, such as helping patients find physicians, schedule appointments, and doing prescription refills.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Edelshane. I'm a vice president at Highmark Health. And as part of my responsibilities, I'm responsible for about 400 different clinicians who work with our customers on the telephone. These are folks that vary from nurses, social workers, behavioral health specialists, pharmacists, wellness coaches, as well as care navigators. So in my world, and we think about AI, it's really three things, right? These are very well-trained clinicians who aren't on the provider side, but more on the care management side. But we need to make sure that one, are we truly identifying those customers, those populations who are at greatest need of our help and the use of AI there? Two, are we doing the best possible effort in terms of engaging these individuals? And then three, and increasingly, and I'd love to talk today about, is during those conversations, how are we appropriately leveraging AI to have the most meaningful, empathetic, caring conversations?
Fabulous. Well, we're going to delve into more of what each of you is really doing, but I kind of wanted to set the stage, right? AI has been around for years, and we've been talking about AI coming into healthcare and transformation for years. So what is it about now that is going to make the difference? And what about AI today is going to change things, move things forward, where other tools in the past may not have? Yoni, do you want to maybe start?
Thank you. Happy to. I really do think we're living in a bit of Goldilocks conditions for, I would call it practical or pragmatic applications of AI, and in particular, conversational AI in healthcare, right? But you mentioned it, that AI has been around for many decades. What we've seen, however, is several really important inflection points, both on the algorithmic side and on the hardware or compute side of the world, that enabled, if you will, the popularization of some of these capabilities that enable very pragmatic use cases that solve real world problems versus kind of pie in the sky, if you will, right? And that's kind of a bit, I think, of what we're all seeing in AI. There's so much buzz around it and a lot of noise, but at the same time, we're seeing very real use cases from, machine vision several years back in radiology to now finally conversational intelligence that started in other industries and sales call centers, general customer service call centers, that is now finally reaching to a variety of clinical interactions, be it on the provider or on the payer side. So I think there's a really interesting confluence, both from the need and opportunity standpoint in the market and healthcare, certainly driven by clinician burnout, looking for and really needing some help and support, and the pragmatic applicability of the products in the market today.
100% agree. I think that really what we're seeing is this convergence of a couple of nice trends in the past couple of years from cloud, which helps a lot with compute. Now also how to do better AI applications with like NVIDIA or GPUs basically being leveraged a lot. And finally, data. So I think that large language models, LLMs, GPT, for some of us, these are not new terms. These are terms that we all know and love for several years. But I think that the major breakthrough, at least to expose this to the wider audience with the ChatGPT buzz, came only in the end of 2022. And part of it was because they got to this inflection point of enough data to make these large language models with the other trends that Yoni talked about successful and actually being able to understand human language. So that's really why we're in this golden area, really, for AI applications.
Yeah, Israel, to build on that, like I've personally been waiting for this era for maybe the last 5 years. And I'm not a very patient individual. But I think you mentioned cloud. I think that's really important for folks to understand. We often hear, I represent a payer, but I think the same could be said of any risk-bearing healthcare organization, right? That like, well, you guys sit on so much data. Why can't you do more, right? Why can't you really move the needle on precision medicine or personalized care, right? The answer is like we're trying really hard. And for us, I look back 5 years ago, and it's the 4th year of a 6-year relationship with Google, and we're migrating all our data to the cloud. And the reality is like 5 years ago, some of this data wasn't liberated, written in languages that are archaic now, not actionable. I think that's been changing in the last 2 to 3 years. For Highmark, again, Bunny, to your point, AI has been around, machine learning has been around, and we've been using it, and it's really kind of talked about in my introduction, like it's really been about better identification and stratification of the population and the individual. But now with, again, the computing power amplified with the power of the cloud, we can set our eyes on the richness that comes from the voice once you turn it into structured data, which was stuff of science fiction maybe 5 years ago. And now it's, it's exciting, it's reality.
Well, to build on that, bringing up conversation today is really about conversational intelligence, right? So when I first heard the term, I was like, what is that? So I just kind of wanted you guys to explain before we get into what you're doing, what is conversational intelligence? Israel?
Yeah, so I'll take my viewpoint and try to put it in simple terms, and I feel that like Yoni later will elaborate and potentially give a much deeper one. But really, like, so for Hyro, where we focus on building these conversational AI assistants. So again, think about chatbots for websites or mobile applications, or the voice AI assistant that picks up on the call center instead of a human and conducts a conversation with you. Afterwards, basically, you have the conversation that the AI had with the patient, for example. And now you get thousands of these conversations, tens, hundreds of thousands of these conversations, and what you can do about that. So I think that one thing that I just wanted to highlight here is take Google Analytics, for example, and think about the way that digital channels or digital businesses used or still are measuring some of the interactions that they have with users. It's mostly through clicks and heat maps and what users try to do with the graphical user interface. And all of a sudden, when we're talking about a conversational interface, the end user, the patient in this case, can say whatever they want. They're not bound to specific buttons or menus. And basically, like if you think about it from like who's in control, instead of the health system being in control and say, this is where you can go, all of a sudden, the patient is in control and they can say whatever they want. And what's nice about it, finally, I'm getting to your question, is that you get a wider range of conversational insights or intelligence. And finally, you can understand what patients are asking about, even if it's not available within your website or mobile application, or even within your entire knowledge. So this is good, again, high level, for two main things, I would say. One is to get a real insights about what your patients are looking for and solve for them. So if we're talking about this find a physician use case that I've mentioned, you can get an insight such as 30% of your patients in Brooklyn are looking for a cardiologist to speak Spanish, but you have zero availability in the next 90 days for all of your cardiologists to speak Spanish. So this is something that will make the organization better, basically, because they might know now that they need cardiologists to speak Spanish in Brooklyn. So this is one part, really like insights to make the organization better, which are much broader than the insights that you would get from Google Analytics or graphical interfaces. The second piece, which is a bit less obvious, at least when it comes to conversational AI assistants, is identifying knowledge gaps. So what these patients or users are asking about that is not available within your knowledge. So take, for example, COVID. When it just hit and we were live with a bunch of health systems, when patient called or chatted with our AI assistant and asked about COVID-19, the AI assistant didn't have a good answer. And you know what? Actually, also the agent on the call center didn't have a good answer, just because they didn't have the knowledge. And we were one of the first to actually alert these health systems, well, there is this new thing called COVID or booster shots later on that patients are asking about, and we've identified it. So let's add it to your knowledge. And by that, make both like your content better, and in our case, also the conversational AI assistants better.
Do you want
Hey,
to add anything?
Israel,
Well, Ben.
I want to add a slightly, I agree with you. I want to add a slightly different flavor, provocative, controversial,
Yeah, go
which is
ahead.
a non-technical definition for me of conversational AI for those out there, which is, to me, as a clinician at heart, as well as a P&L owner, fairly significant size, conversational AI is the key to bringing back the joy of clinical interactions with customers, with patients, with members, eliminating or chipping away at the burdensome work that the staff don't like. And there's an expense advantage there, while also augmenting not necessarily knowledge gaps, but perhaps subtle cues that are clearly can provide a clinical intervention by a nurse or another type of clinician with measurable value, which is very important for us as a pair.
I don't have much to add. I think both Ben and Israel provided really foundational definitions of both kind of solutions and needs. To my point about Goldilocks, what sets humans apart from many other creatures that inhabit our planet is the ability to command language. And the fact that finally technology matured to the point that it could meet us where we're at, right? Like, wouldn't need to write computer language. which was a huge evolution for us in manipulating hardware, is pretty amazing. And specifically in healthcare, as we think about the various engagements and interactions we're having with various healthcare workers, they're either biological in nature, kind of at the clinic, health system, whatnot, or they're verbal, linguistic in nature. And the vast majority are, thankfully, linguistic in nature, and then perhaps proceed to be biological in nature. Being able to capture the wealth and richness of all of that data that exists between various healthcare workers, be it on the payer side or provider side, upstream in the journey or downstream, and utilize that to streamline these interactions by, to Ben's point, taking a variety of the low value work away, right? Like the clinician burnout is to an extent driven by all the tedious documentation that is necessary, that is part of the process. Taking that away and helping people love what they do and be better at it. I think it's kind of the trifecta, if you will. Clinicians are happy, members are more satisfied and engaged, and guess what? The outcomes are superior as well, as demonstrated time and time again by actuarial studies.
So let's get into something practical, which is conversational AI at Laguna. What is it? Who are your customers? How do you integrate it? What problem are you solving?
Super. The problem we're solving is one of care management efficiency and effectiveness. Let me paint a picture, if you will, of a day in the life of a typical care manager, just to kind of explain the realities we're seeing more often than not. If care managers had one member, patient, customer to help with per day, that would be the most attentive and empathetic and effective in their interaction. Except the reality is they have large and growing caseloads and scripts and workflows and, a technology stack, a variety of legacy tools that make it really hard to be empathetic and attentive to every single person dozens or hundreds of times a day. And so that is kind of what, as I think about it, I call that the efficiency trade-off, where quantity wins and quality loses. That is the core problem we're helping them solve. You mentioned integration. What we've built from the care manager standpoint, essentially, is an AI co-pilot, such that they're able to keep their existing workflow, keep their existing technology stack, so they don't need to change anything, and it meets them where they are and offers several really valuable components for them. One, automating all note-taking, as I mentioned kind of before, known as ambient listening these days. Many solutions who do that in the market, I think those variants in quality, and we can double click into that. That's important. Number two, the reason you do that is to help them actually pay attention and empathize with the member in real time. And so we're able, and to that end, there's a variety of quality, right? There's variants of quality of care managers. Some pick up on things that member may utter or say in real time. Some struggle doing so. We're able to do that for them in real time, for them to accept or reject some of these suggestions, and then offer the pathways. Because the challenge is double. It's not only picking up on what the member may be saying in real time, it's also remembering, oh, out of the hundreds of benefits that we're so proud to be offering here at our existing plan and ecosystem, oh, Bunny, for that issue that you mentioned, you struggling to sleep at night, we have solution number 378, right? It's difficult, but it's becoming much easier to be able to pick up on that issue and offer a configured benefit pathway per the plan. Last but not least, we're also tracking the performance and quality and training of the care manager, which provides an ability for them to train and improve, and also for the supervisors to audit the quality of the team. And conversational AI, of course, is threaded across all of this, because all of that comes down to linguistic interactions between the care manager and members.
So your customer, the people, are health plans for the most part. Is that right?
Correct. Health plans or care management organizations.
So Ben, being the health plan representative, how is your organization, incorporating CI today, or what's your thought about its utility?
Yeah, I would say, we're in heavy active exploration mode. I don't want to sound like the industry incumbent Debbie Downer here, but to those listening who might be entrepreneurs and innovators, there are harsh realities that, while personally I'm very bullish in this area as an organization that's responsible for financing and delivering of care, it is our responsibility to be, stewards of customer data, right? And so right now we are more focused on implementing appropriate frameworks around data governance, specifically for AI and for generative AI. And, I'm actually, something I personally participate in. We've taken a framework and modified it from Google just around kind of, it's not just security measures, there are ethical questions, there are, discrimination questions as well. So we take pride and, we meet once a week, and there are various use cases that leverage conversational AI amongst other forms of AI. And we discuss them from both a clinical, value creation vantage point, but really from a privacy, compliance, and ethical standpoint. So we're at the stage of kind of gearing up to go, but being very judicious about any potential partnerships or companies we would explore this space with.
Well, that tees up Hiro, because I think your motto or tagline is all about responsible AI, right?
Right.
Yeah. So tell us who your customers are,
Yeah.
and what this idea of responsible AI means.
Absolutely. So today we focus mainly on big health systems, academic medical centers, hospitals, so call it the more provider side. And today, I think that like, even before I touch on responsible, maybe just to comment on what Ben was saying, providers, payers, different types of animals, right? But I feel that the commonality here is 2023, especially after the ChatGPT buzz at the end of 2022, was more of the interest or really early exploration phase. So I want to learn about this market. I want to educate myself about conversational AI, about Gen AI, that became all the buzz. 2024 started with a boom of okay, we must implement it now. And to Ben's point, while the desire is very strong, there are a lot of concerns and some things that you need to consider before doing so. And definitely a main theme that we're seeing lately is this emergence of AI governance committees within the organization. So it's the first time that, or I don't know if the first time, but at least that I'm seeing that a very large organization is assembling, call it experts or like in different fields. So on our end, you might have someone from the PO, the provider organizations, and you'll have like a representative from the patients, and you'll have the CIO, which is the implementer, and you'll have the financial officer to think about the implications, and the legal officer or compliance to think about these types of issues. And then they think together about, okay, what's the criteria for me to evaluate Gen AI, conversational AI type of solutions. And we've learned that, and we saw that was a repeating theme. And then we've realized that in healthcare, unlike in let's say e-commerce, the cost of mistake is much bigger. So if I'm a chatbot and you're requesting a black shirt and I'm giving you a blue shirt, you know what? Like maybe I've heard the brand, but it's not that much of a big of a deal. But if I suggest you the wrong care plan or a care provider, that's already like a very big deal. So still talking about administrative, not even getting into like clinical and wrong diagnosis and things of that nature. So when we think about responsible conversational AI, we think about like what are the three main pillars are going to be here. For us at least, it's around the three pillars, which are explainability, control, and compliance. So I'll touch very briefly about those. Compliance, let's start with the more obvious one. So obviously every vendor or platform that wants to work with Ben or with healthcare providers needs to be HIPAA compliant, SOC 2 compliant, GDPR if you're working with Europe, CCPA if in California. So you need to know compliance. But I think that it's more than that because we know that AI regulation is coming. So, you know, the EU has started acting on that, Biden executives order. So we understand that in 6 months' time, at least, maybe even more, maybe a bit less, something will happen. And we want to make sure that whatever we're working on today is not going to be redundant or out of date in a few months' time. So when we say compliance, it's not only about what's available today, but thinking about how can we configure compliant and how can we support it in the early term, short term, long-term future with the AI regulation coming up. So this is really an important layer for you to have, and not just a checkbox to check. So that's one. The second one is control. So I like to say that generative AI, the word generative is not always a feature. Sometimes it's a bug. So there are cases where you don't want the AI to generate things and potentially hallucinate. You actually want the same old boring canned or controlled response. Think about like an emergency situation when you really want the AI to always say, so it's not AI, call 911 or go to the ER. And this is just one example of a control that you want to put on your conversational AI. Some other examples would be around the data sources that have been used to train the model or the prioritization of these data sources when you actually reply back with answers, and how it affects bias, which is a big thing that we see in these AI governance committees. So control is a very big part of what I'd say today is needed for good implementation of conversational AI. And finally, explainability. Explainability, in short, like large language models, like machine learning models, are black boxes, which means you have an input, you have an output, you don't really understand what's happening inside. And while you can't give full visibility because some of it is statistical and really like very large neuron-based networks, I think that you do want to give some explainability to yourself, to your patients, to your providers, or organizations around that. And this is a hard task by itself, and that's something that you need to take into account when you deal with regulated industries such as healthcare.
Okay, thank you. Actually, we're getting some really great questions in from the audience, so I am going to select some. One is around how close are we to conversational AI being able to identify and converse in languages other than English, like in an inbound call center?
Yeah. You want to do 1, 2, 3, and we all give a number, or like I would say very close. And by very close, I mean not in the next few months, but I think that again, some of the advancements that we have with machine learning models or deep learning is mostly due to the data that we have. So with languages where you have lots of data, obviously English, Chinese, Spanish, and some of the other common languages, machine translation is almost a non-issue. There is an issue there, but I definitely see we need to solve some latency issues, so it's not that easy. But the tech stack is almost there. The problem is in languages that you don't have a lot of data, and that's something that I'm not that expert on, but I'd say the future in which I can speak Spanish and the AI assistant would understand me and translate whatever English knowledge that it has back to Spanish and reply it back is very close.
I'll jump in real quick, and sorry, my internet is coming in and out, so I apologize if there's any connectivity issues here. I think it's a fantastic question and something that we fortunately had some experience in over the last couple of years. We've been working not only in the US, but also in other countries, such as South Africa and now entering Latin America. And I'm saying that to say, right, it's not just languages, even dialects and tones and styles differ dramatically. And it's pretty amazing seeing the breadth of coverage that the existing capabilities enable us to work at effectively. And to Israel's point, we're just at the beginning of that, but we're seeing very strong performance across multiple languages and markets already.
So I love this other question of around reimbursement, because we talk about all these nice tools and how they're integrating and how they're, but who pays for it, right? So the question is around lack of reimbursement for many of the solutions. How do we best overcome some of these obstacles, at least in the short term, and then will they be covered in the longer term?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to necessarily our reimbursement policy, but I think I understand the question behind the question, and let me sort of put a different hat on now, perhaps paraphrasing my colleagues at Allegheny Health Network, right, which is Highmark's hospital system in Western Pennsylvania. I don't think we're close to conversational AI doing activities that will then directly tie to billable services, right? I don't think that's kind of the point. And Israel, keep me honest, obviously you work on the provider side. I think it's more about, for now, the realities of physician and clinician burnout, right? I mean, there's an industry term, pajama time, right? With these poor folks, my colleagues who are playing catch up in the evenings when they should be with their loved ones, who are typing up notes and doing, let's face it, like non-clinical activities, right? And these can be done appropriately leveraging conversational AI. And ambient listening. Now, to me, and I think my HN colleagues would support me on this, like the next step is not to then drive more throughput to then generate more revenue for a hospital system. I think the next stage is then to give that time back to those providers for some of the activities that are so important to the practice of clinical medicine, where it comes to apprenticeship, teaching, research, right? And maybe actually like spending time with your family and being happy, right? And so I think it's less of a reimbursement question. It's more, how can these tools be put into the hands of these very intelligent providers to help them get back to the joy of practice that they joined the profession for?
I 100% agree with Ben, and I think that there's a lot of thought about like what can we do with these efficiency gains that we're going to gain from the conversational AI. Yoni mentioned as co-pilots. I'd say again that some of it is to definitely reduce the burnout. A good analogy that I potentially like, for me it works, is for some of us, we remember when we went on a trip, we needed to open a map before and understand which paths we're going to take and how do we get from point A to point B. And if we get lost on the way, because we did get lost on the way and we didn't have cell phones back then, and we open the map again and look at the map. And today we have GPS. And what does it mean? Like, what's the incentive? It just makes us more efficient. So when we plan a trip, we can spend more time on the trip instead of planning it and getting there on the way. So I think that obviously in healthcare, a lot of inefficiencies, especially on the health system side, that with burnout together really scream for some automation. And I don't think that this is on the expense of the patient or the member. On the contrary, I do believe in the win-win situation here, because if we're talking about the retail-like experience of being able to schedule appointments 24/7 via any channel of the patient choice, that's a big difference than what they have today.
So the reimbursement angle sort of gets to something bigger, which is a challenge, right? What are some of the challenges that you find with adoption, and what are there downsides? What are some of what do you worry about when you're thinking about CI? Yoni, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, no, thank you. Nothing is ever perfect, right? And kind of the more buzz there is, usually the more suspicion there is. Certainly in a rightfully so conservative industry such as healthcare, we're talking about human lives, not as a euphemism. That is literally the reality of the business. All of that was compounded over the last several weeks and months with a variety of hacks and service disruptions that now, and I love Israel's point about responsible AI, technology adoption in general, and AI adoption, conversational AI adoption, and visibility to how and why that works is top of mind. And so while we're all, I think, very excited about the confluence of kind of the problems that are top of mind for payers and providers today, and about the pragmatic availability of solutions, I would say that the level of scrutiny for technology and AI has probably never been higher. And Ben can speak to that better than me on the payer side. That presents, I think, important architectural and information security challenges, perhaps opportunities, but certainly challenges for us innovators. To put it simply, you have to behave as a mature company from day one. And it's expensive and it's costly and requires planning, but that is the name of the game. And so you have to go through the SOC 2 and high trust and make the right architectural choices that provide complete visibility and comfort to your customers, who are more concerned than ever about the downside of some of the amazing solutions you're bringing to the table. So we're seeing both kind of challenges, but I think those actionable choices and actions that us innovators could and should do to ease some of these concerns.
Yeah, Yoni, I would just add two couple of concepts. One is, at least in the care management space in my area, everything has to be human at the helm, right? There was a great question in the chat just about, is this a case where kind of regulation has maybe innovation is not has gone much faster than regulation? I think the answer is possibly yes. But as we think about this next wave, and for me personally about the AI assistant here is only as powerful and value add as the human behavior that occurs to appropriately adopt it, right? So we're going to have to invest time working with our nursing staff, various other flavors of clinicians, to say, okay, when you get a nudge, a suggestion of an intervention, like, first is like, do you ignore it, or do you say, okay, let me think about it, incorporate it? But at least under my watch, nothing is going to be said as care guidance to a customer without the human brain of the trained clinician evaluating that for themselves, because it is their responsibility, right? And then subsequently the documentation and proofing it and putting your name against things, signing it for all various compliance reasons. It is your responsibility. But we are giving you this tool to be, the better clinician, or perhaps the more like empowered clinician that you join the profession for. So that's one. that's something I do think about, just in terms of a challenge that we will overcome. The second challenge, and just kind of a watch out, and this is maybe to Israel and to Yoni to think about, is I think, you know, in the US landscape, our cultural inherent bias to do everything in English first, and coming back to, I think it was a question from the gentleman Ron, which is, you know, at least, you know, for Highmark, we operate in major metropolis areas with what makes America great, just this blend of cultures and nationalities and immigrants, right? And we need to serve all of them, and particularly Spanish first customers, and increasingly Chinese. But you know, we can't like just push really quick on the English language and hope that the other languages catch up. It has to be lockstep, and purely for business reasons as well. I mean, you know, CMS and STARS is putting a decent amount of weighting on non-English customer interactions and data capture. So that's something that I think is going to be a challenge. Again, can be overcome with thoughtful planning.
And the data. Obviously, we are getting so much new data, right, that we haven't gotten before through this technology. How is that being used? How is it getting back into the EMR? How is it being protected? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can start. I think that just really briefly, if I can divide the world into like two types of call it use cases when it comes to conversational AI, and that's a bit technical, so less related to healthcare. One is knowledge retrieval. So I'm looking to find information and just to get an answer back. And the second one is the second part is transactional. So I want to schedule an appointment. I want to pay my bill. I want to do something. A lot of the time, by the way, like they work in tandem. So I want to find a physician. This is knowledge retrieval, and then to schedule an appointment with him. That's a transactional. And to the question, in order to first off get the relevant knowledge, I need very deep integration into the EHR and some other supportive software that healthcare organizations are using. And if I want to do something transactional, like for example, scheduling the appointment, not only that I need to be able to read to the AHR, but I actually need to be able to write to the AHR. So, and that's where I'd say interoperability and FHIR APIs is another trend that really works in terms of like, why now? What happens now? Finally, I think that we got to a stage where we understand that the patient's data is the patient's data. And if some other vendors want to get access to it and the patient accepts it, then the health system, the health plan needs to give the data, access to this data. So I think that today we're in a much better, I'd say, like position to be able to deeply integrate into these systems and make sure that we're not only reading, but actually writing into them in a transactional manner. And scheduling appointment, that's just like something that we do a lot. That's the biggest call driver for call centers of health systems. But to Ben's point, a lot of the use cases are actually not patient-facing or member-facing, but they are clinician-facing. So another thing that I've been seeing a lot is around summarization of notes or like the ambient listening piece. And some of that is directly integrated into the EHR. So after the patient did his visit with the doctor basically gets a summary, and then he can edit it and publish it into the EHR. So I'd say that conversational AI solutions, I don't want to say would be worthless, but much less of a value if they wouldn't be integrated very deeply into the systems and the tech stack that these health organizations use today. And again, luckily for us, interoperability helps us with getting this deep integration.
So I think integration is a fantastic question, and the picture looks quite different on the payer side of the technology sector, Israel's point. we all know that there's a meaningful consolidation or concentration of EMR, EHR solutions on the health system side, right? You have kind of some of the epics, so to speak, of the world, and then maybe a long tail of smaller ones for clinics. But I think most players in the arena try to integrate with some of the big ones. These big ones do not really exist on the payer side. The payer technology stack is far more fragmented. So in fact, what we found, what benefits us more to kind of alleviate, if you will, the integration pain point is to create a as little integration friction as possible. What we found is actually what's difficult for most of our buyers, most is kind of calling their IT folks and saying, hey, when can we add this to your schedule? Like, sure, we'll get to it in Q2 2027. And so figuring out from a product architecture standpoint, how can you deliver value right out of the box? And someone who was asking a PLG, a product-led growth question, I think that's a fantastic question and a critical one at that, because the last decade has seen, again, kind of talk about some of the trends in the industry, a variety of technology solutions that payers and providers have adopted. And so the bar to come in with any value proposition is that much higher and infinitely higher from an IT or technology stack standpoint. And so all of that for us, we found that delivering value right out of the box is critical. And frankly, being very flexible on integration such that we move from a push to a pull as we think about it motion, such as instead of you have to integrate, is giving the buyer, the payer in this case, the option to integrate as they see fit. And that changed the dynamic for us quite meaningfully, both streamlining and accelerating sales motion and opening up a variety of, I would say, configuration alternatives for our customers.
Cool. Well, we have a really interesting question, and this is really meant for you, Ben. One of our listeners says that research already shows AI systems outperforming humans in many clinical environments. Is your organization giving any thought now to a future in which machines are performing services that were exclusively billable by humans?
It's a really good question. I would maybe take it upper level and tie it to another question, I think, just around this notion of measurable waste in any country's healthcare system. And I think some consulting studies maybe point to like 30% waste in the US health system, which is is frankly saddening, and certainly something we at Highmark are trying to tackle. I do think there is an appropriate role for AI in augmenting human workflows, perhaps even kind of going beyond supplementation. And someone, perhaps a professor of sociology might say, hey, Ben, well, if AI can chip away at the 30%, maybe take out half and take out 15%, like, isn't that going to have dire consequences to unemployment in healthcare? And I like to be an optimist, and I would say I disagree, right? I think we still have care deserts in this country. We still have nursing shortages. We grossly underinvest in human capital and talent in the preventative care space, right? I think this is, again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I think appropriate use of AI, particularly with the voice, is the key to unlocking some of the promised value of value-based care. And again, this is why I'm very excited about this space. But Bonnie, maybe we can start a LinkedIn thread or a hashtag, right? Which is, I challenge your listeners out there to say, you give me a work activity, whether you're a provider, payer, or other, you give me a work activity that costs a lot, and I challenge, us collectively to not have a use case there where AI can play a part. And AI can play a part in not just making it more efficient, but better clinical outcomes, better patient satisfaction, better provider satisfaction, and more equitable care. And you're hitting on all 5 components of the what is it called? Quintuple aim. I think that's the newest aim.
Oh, they've added to it. Any other thoughts on that?
I think that to me, Ben, I think there's a fascinating tug of war now between, to use kind of technical terms, between co-pilots and autopilots. And I think it's a fascinating conversation. We obviously are deep in the human camp, if you will, of this philosophical debate between innovators, where care will, for the foreseeable future, will be human-led. And our goal and opportunity is to empower humans by taking low-value tasks away and empowering them to be at the practice at the top of the license, as is the jargon in the industry. There is a school of thought for several innovators out there that are looking to offer autopilots that be kind of replace clinical or care management interactions with robots, essentially. The technology is there essentially on many fronts, which I think is the good, bad news, depends on your philosophy out there. I think the challenge and kind of the fascinating discussion is, are people ready to adopt it? People as in us, members, health consumers. Do we want to speak with a robot? And is the buying universe, be it providers, payers, or anyone in between, happy to start leaning in so hard into automating? And I have questions, if you will, about both, and I'm happy to discuss, but I think this is a big philosophical debate that is just in its infancy, that the more that the technology will be stronger, more effective, efficient, and cheaper, the more I think this question will haunt us.
So we just have a few minutes left. We've had a really robust discussion. The time has flown, really. There's a lot more questions, but I wanted each of you to think about, if we got together again in 5 years for another webinar, what would we be talking about? What on vis-a-vis conversational AI? Where is it going? And you could even be broader in terms of AI generally in 5 years. What kind of conversations are we going to be having?
So hard to predict. I just like maybe share a very brief story. I'd say that when AI became trendy, people thought that it's going to automate, call it, a lot of human qualities or imitate a lot of human qualities. And the one quality that everyone thought that is going to stay forever a human quality was creativity. And all of a sudden, we've realized that there's a lot of hallucinations within these models, and the models might start get creative a lot of the time. And all of a sudden, the use cases that were being used the most with this AI, especially like in computer vision, was creativity. And like you just imagine it, and the AI can help you become creative and brainstorm. And that's just to say that, like, we might have our guesses and estimations, but really we don't know. We don't know. That's what's really exciting and maybe a bit scary about the next 5 years or so, or obviously even more than that, because these are the first time that we have algorithms or machines that we don't really fully understand what's happening inside. And okay, we understand that like data created this big leap forward, but we don't understand exactly why. So I'd say that that's on that side. On the healthcare side, like this, there is the crawl, walk, run. So the crawl would always be around administrative use cases and things that are less clinical by nature, the more co-pilots ones. So definitely, like in a few years' time, every one of us will have at least one co-pilot, at least. Maybe we'll have like several co-pilots that helps us do like various things. Regarding autopilot, I do believe that there will be also some of that happening within 5 years, maybe not in a fully clinical diagnosis, or maybe for very specific clinical tasks, but we'll see. Anyway, I'm very excited.
I'm happy to jump in. Technology continues to grow at exponential pace. And I say that because I think some of kind of those early debates that we're seeing now and some of the early concerns that we're seeing both in our buyer universe, right? These responsible AI committees, et cetera. As you think about the pace of technology growth and kind of we're almost at the verge of AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is mind-blowing, I say as a geek, but also very concerning, I say as a human being. I think kind of on the 5-year time horizon, we'll see much more scrutiny, not only at the buyer, payers, providers, or anything in between spectrum. We'll see the regulator start develop much more sophistication and understanding and leaning into that. Because again, to kind of to the previous point, we're dealing with human lives and automating clinical tasks, alleviating burden are all amazing when they're done kind of at a certain scope. And some of that scope creep and technology advancement are real. So I think we'll see a lot more sophistication from that side over the next several years.
Mine's a bit more boring. In that, I think if we kind of tie back some of the themes we've been discussing around, the assistant, the conversational AI assistant, empowering a clinician to what to adopt their license, better experience for them, better experience for the patient, the customer. I think the next 5 years, the frontier will be video. So, we've been talking about telephonic interactions a lot. I think that will, particularly MySpace care management, I think it'll shift to video. And then how do we use visual data to again augment better practice of care management?
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you all for that. We are just about at 1 o'clock, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I want to thank you, Ben, Israel, and Yoni, for a really robust discussion. We covered a lot of ground. We've taped this, so we will be sending out a replay. And I hope that all of our listeners have gotten as much out of it as I have. So thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.